The histories of the Imperium are writ in the blood of martyrs and the deeds of heroes. But heroism is not a virtue of birth. It is a scar, earned in crucibles of terror and pain, long before the light of the Emperor ever dawned upon 1,000 worlds. Before the Primarchs, before the legions, there were proving grounds, worlds of such exquisite misery that they could only breed monsters, or the men who hunt them. Behold the death world of Caliban, a planet shrouded in shadow, its vast forests infested with great beasts warped by the foul energies of the Empyrean. To survive here was to fight. To rule was to be the ultimate predator. The knightly brotherhoods, chief among them the Order, held the line. Their ranks were not filled by volunteers, but by the survivors of a brutal cull. As the image records, a supplicant, often barely a child, was cast out into the freezing snow and the psychological abyss of the forest's depths. Old texts speak of the trial.
Let the forest take the weak. We have need only of the strong.
The child faced not only the elements, but the terror of the unseen, forging an unbreakable mind or shattering completely under the strain. Thus were the Knights of Caliban created, not through lecture or drill, but through the primal fear of being hunted, a blood oath sworn to themselves in the freezing dark. This relentless process created the finest monster slayers in the segmentum, men fit to stand against the horrors of the galaxy. But this brutal tradition was merely the preface to a much larger, darker history, a history that would be forever altered by a child abandoned in those same woods, a child who would not be hunted, but would become the hunter. Not all worlds that cradled the Emperor's lost sons were bastions of a forgotten golden age. Some were prisons. Among the most infamous of these was Caliban, a planet drowning in its own shadow-haunted woodlands, a realm designated by imperial taxonomists simply as a death world. Humanity on Caliban did not live, it endured. Its settlements were nothing more than walled fortresses, stone islands in a green sea of perpetual twilight, their gates sealed against the horrors that ruled the forests. These were the great beasts, nightmarish apex predators, monstrous amalgams of tooth and claw that bled acid and terrorized the populace. They were not mere animals, but living expressions of the planet's malice. In response, a new form of human society was forged in desperation. To fight the threat, a knightly brotherhood was founded, the Order. Its tenets were revolutionary for a feudal culture. It demanded pure merit over noble lineage, recruiting from all layers of society. The peasant with a strong sword arm was worth more than a dozen cowardly aristocrats. This was the crucible that created the Knights of Caliban, warriors who existed for a single purpose, to hunt the beasts and reclaim the world, one bloody clearing at a time. For a time, they succeeded. The Order brought a measure of light to the endless forest, a fragile balance of man against monster. But the history of the galaxy is a litany of broken equilibriums. These knights believed they were the ultimate predators of Caliban, yet they had no conception of the true meaning of the word. In the deepest, darkest heart of the forest, a greater hunter was stirring, one who would not just slay beasts, but conquer worlds. Before the Emperor's light reached its shrouded forests, knighthood on Caliban was not a title bestowed, but a prize clawed from the jaws of death. The fortress monasteries of the Order were not schools, but forges, and their methods were absolute. An aspirant's first trial was not one of endurance before a gate, but of sacrifice within the woods. He was given a simple blade, a single canteen of water, and a final, chilling command from the masters of the Order. Return with the head of a great beast, or do not return at all. This was the hunt. Cast into the perpetual twilight of the forest, the boy had to become a predator or become prey. The first lesson of the Order is that survival is not a right, but a victory earned through bloodshed, either the monsters or your own. The great gates of Alderuk grind shut, and with their closing, the life the aspirant once knew is severed. Before him lies the forest, a living, breathing labyrinth of malice. The trial is not a single night of cold, but an indeterminate sentence in a green hell. The chart is not an abstraction, it is a record of attrition. The beasts of Caliban are not mere animals, they are abominations of tooth and claw, twisted by the dark energies that bleed into the woods. The aspirant is not merely cold or tired, he is hunted. By sunset on the first day, the psychological torment has claimed its tithe. 1/3 of the aspirants are simply gone, their screams swallowed by the forest, their dream of becoming a knight ending as a smear of blood on the forest floor. For those who survive the first cycle of dusk and dawn, there is no relief. There is only the dawning horror that the beasts are not the only thing to fear in the dark. The Calibanite forest is not merely a physical place, it is a psychic entity. As the aspirant pushes deeper, a new threat emerges, one that cannot be fought with a blade. Observe the data. As the blue line depicting physical exhaustion rises, the red line measuring psychic intrusion begins its vicious exponential ascent. These are the Susurrations, the whispers of the wood itself. The forest probes the aspirant's mind, offering temptations of power, visions of an easier path. The darkness from the tree line seems to reach out like a living thing, states one surviving account. At the apex of his isolation, the psychic siege becomes extreme, intended to corrupt the soul of any lesser man. This is the true filter of the order. Dawn eventually breaks, but the whispers do not cease. They only quiet, waiting. The boy who endures this endless hunt is now something else entirely. For what crawls from that forest is not simply a survivor, but a soul that has looked into the abyss and has not blinked. Physical endurance could be measured and mastered. But the true Crucible of Caliban was not a trial of the body. It was a war for the soul, waged within the leprous, haunted forests, where the very trees screamed in silent agony. The aspirants called this mental assault the Susurrations. It was an invasion of the mind, a psychic onslaught emanating from the haunted arbors. Whispering voices, slick with malice, coiled around their resolve, promising an end to the struggle. They offered a dark pact, the temptation, urging the young knights to step from the path of honor and into the shadows. Flesh and power everlasting, immortality awaits you in the dark wood. To those who wavered, the forest would grant the vision, a glimpse of ultimate dominion. They saw themselves not as servants, but as gods, crushing the great beasts with a maddening, dark energy, the very power they had sworn to purge from their world. The archives do not record how many aspirants fell to this promise. Their names simply struck from the rolls. But the whispers lingered long after the trials ended, a seed of damnation planted in the hearts of even the strongest. And one must ask, what ancient, terrible intelligence fueled such promises, and what price would it eventually demand for its gifts? Survival in Caliban is a war fought on 4 fronts. The trial to join the order is not a single test. It is a systematic dismantling of a boy. The first layer is the beast. Against the monstrous fauna, the only weapon is cunning and a willingness to kill. The consequence for failure is simple, absolute, a violent death. Should the body endure, the second layer attacks the spirit. The aspirant is met not with aid, but with total isolation. Every instinct screams that he is alone, abandoned. The weapon required is an iron will, a refusal to despair. Failure is madness. Past the terror of being hunted, the trial turns psychological. The aspirant must contend with the forest itself, a lethal environment of poisonous plants and treacherous terrain. Here, discipline must master exhaustion. But the final layer, the true heart of the test, is supernatural. Alone, exhausted, and hunted, the aspirant will begin to hear the whispers. The forest itself speaks, promising power, an end to the struggle, a path to glory. All it asks for in return is the aspirant's soul. The body can be broken, the spirit can shatter, the will can fail. But to listen to the whispers is to invite damnation. And so, the question remains, for those who do not break, who do not die, and who deny the forest's foul bargain, what is left of them to become a knight? The trial within the great forests of Caliban was not a test of blade or brawn. It was a siege of the soul. For each young aspirant abandoned to the endless night, the true enemy was formless, a psychic assault crawling from the ancient soil, whispering temptations of power, of surrender, of despair. Survival demanded an anchor against this mental abyss. For the boy Zahariel, that anchor was his cousin, Nimiel. As the gnarled roots of the forest seemed to writhe and the whispers promised an end to fear through madness, the two stood together. No words were exchanged. In that crucible, language was a weakness to be exploited by the enemy. Their bond was unspoken. The simple, defiant presence of another human soul was the only shield that held. When the first light of dawn finally broke, the psychic predators receded, like vermin fleeing the sun. The cost of this victory was then revealed in the silence. Of the nearly 200 boys sent into the forest, only 12 remained. The lesson learned in that terrible night would become the bedrock of the First Legion. Brotherhood, silent and absolute, was the only true bastion against the horrors of the void. Yet this shared trauma, this reliance on an unspoken pact, would also plant a seed of secrecy that would one day bear the most bitter fruit. The trials to join the First Legion were not concerned with the strength of an aspirant's arm, but the fortitude of his soul. In the lethal forests of primeval Caliban, a boy would be stripped of everything, left with only the gnawing cold, the pangs of hunger, and the omnipresent terror of the hunt. This ordeal was by design, a brutal philosophy codified by the masters of the order. The figure of Master Remiel, a keeper of these ancient rites, articulated this core tenet perfectly.
A man can be trained in the skills of killing. He can learn to use a knife or other weapons. But these things are nothing if his mind is not strong. The mind and will of a knight are as much weapons in his armory as his sword and pistol.
The hunt for the great beasts was a psychological crucible. The goal was not merely to survive the monster, but to master the fear it induced. An aspirant had to face the absolute certainty of a violent end, and in that final moment, refuse to break. He had to learn that willpower alone was the ultimate weapon. An Astartes forged in such a fire becomes more than a man. He becomes an incarnation of will. But one must ask, when the mind itself is tempered into a weapon, what humanity is left to wield it? And what secrets must such a mind be strong enough to keep? This dualistic path to perfection is the foundation of the order. Its doctrine holds that the body and mind are but two aspects of a single weapon, each honed by a separate yet interlocking discipline. The first is the verbatim, the discipline of the mind. In frigid scriptoriums, neophytes commit to endless recitation and analysis of the order's most ancient and sacred texts. It is a process of total indoctrination, burning away individual thought and replacing it with unshakable dogma. The second is the spiral, the discipline of the body, an ancient hypnotic sword work ritual practiced until the warrior's muscles act without conscious instruction. Forms of attack and defense, depicted as runic pathways on their training picts, are repeated thousands upon thousands of times. The verbatim provides the reason to kill. The spiral provides the autonomic reflex to do so. Your mind will know the heresy before it is spoken. Your blade will find the heart before the mind has given the command. Together, these two paths hardwire lethal skill into pure instinct, forging a warrior whose every fiber is dedicated to the art of death. But in this quest for perfection, in erasing the flawed mortal to create the flawless weapon, one must ask what terrible cost is paid by the soul. The final initiation rips the supplicant from the relief of survival into sudden terror. Upon returning to the fortress, the moment of triumph is stolen. In its place, the cold of a stone floor on bare knees, the rough bind of rope, the suffocating dark of a hood, and the sharp, undeniable pressure of a blade against the throat. The captors are unseen, their voices a low growl in the dark. This is no mere test of memory. It is a spiritual purification. Just as the ritual text dictates, the aspirant is ambushed. He is the victor of the great hunt, now reduced to a helpless prisoner. Then comes the one absolute rule, delivered by a master of the order whose face remains a phantom of the void.
The forest lies. It whispers falsehoods to corrupt the soul. A lie is a betrayal of our vows. If I hear the forest's lies on your tongue, I will cut your throat.
Every word spoken by the aspirant is weighed, every hesitation dissected, every memory of the hunt scrutinized for the shadow of the forest's taint. What is being tested here is not knowledge, but purity. It is a search for any stain of corruption, any hint that the aspirant drew upon the forest's dark power to survive. For in the philosophy of the Order, a victory won through dishonorable means is no victory at all. It is the first step towards damnation. For every ounce of plasteel and ceramite grafted to the body, a ton of doctrine and psychological iron must be hammered into the soul. The process is not one of education, but of erasure and reconstruction. The aspirant kneels in total darkness, senses deprived, mind laid bare. From the void, the voices of his unseen masters begin their assault. They are not questions, but weapons.
Your opponent's blow comes on a high diagonal line, left or right.
A test of reflex.
Answer quickly, what kind of parry?
A test of knowledge.
Recite the verbatim.
A test of faith. The interrogations overlap, a cacophony designed to shatter conscious thought.
Is honor the only consideration? Incorrect! Think! No time! Strike!
This is the cognitive overload trial. Its purpose is to push the aspirant past the breaking point to ensure that when his rational mind fails under the stress of mortal threat, what remains is not a terrified mortal, but the pure, unthinking instrument of the chapter's will. An aspirant is thus unmade and remade, his very instincts rewritten according to tactical scripture. But in this process, where individuality is scoured away to leave only duty, what becomes of the man who must wield this terrible strength? What is left to fall when the conditioning finally fails? Dealing in the dark, the aspirant endures a trial, not of the body, but of the soul. He is caught in a psychological crucible, assailed from two sides by the very figures he seeks to join. From one side, the masters of the Order conduct their examination, a storm of questions about the hunt, testing the aspirant's memory and integrity. From the other, a vicious counterpoint. A senior master, playing the role of the accuser, attacks the boy's very soul. It is a torrent of bile, suspicion, and pure psychological abuse. Every answer is met with scorn.
This wretch reeks of the forest. His survival is a flaw in the steel. He made a pact in the dark to save his own skin, and his weakness will be our doom. I demand he be cast out, now, before he costs better men their lives.
The purpose is not merely to test honesty. It is to discover if the aspirant's conviction can be utterly shattered. Will he break when a figure of ultimate authority, a living idol of the Order he worships, actively despises him and accuses him of the ultimate sin? The test is not whether the blade falls, but whether the boy, in the face of such condemnation, can hold to his own truth, even if it means his death. Before an aspirant could be called brother in the order, he first had to renounce his own blood. The final trial was not a test of arms, but a sacrifice of the self. Upon passing a grueling interrogation, the hood is removed in blinding light, and Lord Cypher, a title, not a man, strikes the aspirant's palm with the ceremonial blade. This ritual is a blood oath, severing the boy from his past lineage. With his hand pressed upon the cold, bloodied steel, the aspirant speaks the vow: to protect Caliban, to keep the Order's secrets, and to never strike a brother. Lineage, nobility, the old self, all are declared dead. The knight is reborn, and with this rebirth comes the consequence, a solemn curse spoken into the silence of the chamber.
If my words here today are lies, let this knife return to slash my throat.
An oath to forge an unbreakable brotherhood, sealed against the monsters of the wood. But such vows are fragile things. They do not account for the coming of greater powers, of new loyalties demanded by a father found, and the terrible, simple truth that the greatest monster a knight will ever face is the brother standing next to him. We end this record with a question, not of strategy, nor of conquest, but of creation. In a galaxy teeming with nightmares, what manner of weapon is required to dominate them? Before you is the blueprint, an archaeotech schematic for the perfect warrior, the intended pinnacle of the Emperor's design. It begins with the head, forged to possess an unbreakable will. This is not achieved through inspiration, but through blind interrogation, a euphemism for the systematic breaking of the psyche, rendering it immune to terror only by exposing it to torments beyond comprehension. Then the soul, engineered to be incorruptible. It is tested by the whispers in the snow, a trial that forces the aspirant to confront the raw corruption of the warp. To stare into that abyss is to risk it staring back. A soul so hardened can easily become brittle. The heart of this being is brotherhood, bound by blood oath. They draw infinite strength from their kin, a bond so powerful it can eclipse all other loyalties, even fealty to the Imperium itself. Finally, the hands, gifted with lethal reflex. Hardwired by the spiral, the text reads, making martial supremacy an autonomic biological function. This is the final act of dehumanization, turning a man into an instinctual engine of death. The Crucible was successful. It forged the weapon. And in its terrible paradoxical success lies the great, weeping tragedy of our species. In the effort to create a warrior who could not be broken by nightmares, the Imperium instead created the perfect vessel to become one. The very qualities meant to ensure loyalty, unbreakable will, exposure to the warp, fanatical brotherhood, were the precise vectors of the Horus heresy and the countless betrayals that followed. The weapon turned upon its master. This is the fundamental truth of our grim reality. In the endless war for survival, the tools we create to save ourselves will inevitably be the instruments of our own damnation.
This concludes Archival Record 77.4-Omega. Subscribe to these archives for the preservation of knowledge. Let the aspirants know what truth it must scan next in the comments below.